Coming to you live. It is April the 15th, 2015, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about what it's like to grow up as a member, as a child, in a family where your grandparents came from overseas through Ellis Island. Many of you do have grandparents that came from other countries, and they came here for various reasons. But when you grow up in a household like I did, and you have grandparents that came from Italy on both sides, you really get the flavor of what these people went through, and you, in talking to them over dinners and stuff, so forth and so on. Of course, for me, it was hard to understand them because I don't speak Italian. You know, I did take 2 years of Spanish, which is similar to Italian, but as I said before, my father forbid us from speaking any language other than English. So even if I knew how to speak Italian, he laid the law down, and because of the job position that he had, he was always worried that if anyone from the government was listening, he had a top security clearance and was working on top secret electronic Navy projects for radar and undersea warfare electronics and above sea warfare electronics and other secrets involving what today would be considered old-fashioned video equipment, but back in the days when they were first inventing how to videotape somebody and record those tapes and then linking it to, well, you get the gist. I'm not going to go getting into that, but every week my parents, as we moved to New Jersey, even though I told you I was born around the corner from the Liberty Bell, I was born 7th Street. I was born about 6 blocks away from the Liberty Bell. So literally, if there weren't any buildings in the way, from where I was born, I would have been able to see the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall, where you know, the bell with the crack is and everything. I visited a few years ago, and I have a videotape. And as soon as we get the website up and going, I'm going to keep talking about this, and it seems like it's turning out to be a bigger project, and I have more material than I thought, and I'm finding more material all the time. So I'll tell you what, before I even get going, let me just do what I have to here and ask you for donations. I mean, I sort of hate to do this, but we are really a grassroots organization, and I am not in a position like an oligarch or like one of these politicians who has a big pension or has already been in office and therefore made a lot of money from insider trading. And I have no such money to tap into. But first of all, I thoroughly enjoy talking to people, all kinds of people. I don't care if you're from the right or from the left, or you're Democrat or Republican. You can give me a number. That telephone number is with me all the time, and I'd be glad to talk to you about literally any topic. It could be insurance related, securities related, real estate related. I do have credentials, professional credentials, and lots of experience in all of those fields, and also done my own studies in legalese, so I understand that, and the whole Allstate case and disparate treatment. So I understand many topics, and so whatever it is that's bothering you, or if you'd like to just talk to me about anything, or if you have any ideas about what you think I should focus my campaign on, or if you have any good ideas about how you think that the country could run. And may I suggest to you that if you want to call me with information like that, I think the best way to look at it is just to think to yourself, well, look, if a genie were to come out of the bottle and say, I grant you 3 wishes, what would they be? And if the genie said, "I grant you 3 wishes," and what would they be? But the 3 wishes have to be pertain to how you want your country to be run. What would those 3 wishes be? And so why don't you all think about that? What if you could have anything you wanted, what would it be? Besides somebody just like winning the lottery or something like that. Sure, we'd all like to win the lottery. I could certainly use the money. But if you could have anything you wanted regarding how the country would be run, what would it be? And give me a call, because it's going to give me ideas here. And that's kind of how I looked at it. I thought long and hard before considering running for office, and I thought to myself, gee, what difference could I make? What would I do if I could do anything? If I were some sort of if I had some sort of magical power, what would I want that magical power to be? What would I want to do for the people? And I know, to me, that if my 3 answers to the question would be: number 1, I would want to lift the terribly poverty-stricken people, like the homeless people. And I'm talking about people who literally are homeless. And a lot of these people I know are probably sick and mentally ill and stuff like that. But I would see to it that they received help. And I mean honest, true, caring, and loving help. These people need help, and if they're Americans and they were born here, they deserve the best possible help in the world. And I'm sure that we can do that, and not at any great cost. As an insurance guy, I can tell you a system can be worked out where it isn't really going to cost that much to care for these people. And even if it costs more than you would like to spend, it's just something that we have to do. It's just a human right. We can't leave people living in the street, and especially now with Fukushima going, and it's actually dangerous to be outside in the rain. So we have to. That would be my wish number 1. My wish number 2 would be to lift the middle class and to give them a boost, because right now we're losing the middle class, because we have so many things have happened in the last, since we've had the economic collapse, but leading up to that, so many laws and so many new laws were created, and so many rights were taken away, and the government enacted so many laws where the laws themselves are against the Constitution, that they were beyond the imagination of the business owners. And a lot of the middle class people are the business owners. Now they're not big business owners, but they own small businesses, and but most of the businesses in the United States are in fact small businesses. Most people who have a job are working for small companies. They're not working for big companies. They're working for companies that have 50 employees or less. And so these companies are having a hard time raising capital. They're not publicly traded companies, so they can't simply sell stock. I suppose they could sell stock privately, but they really need help from the commercial banks. So I would say number 2, that would be my second wish, is that we help the businesses, so that the businesses in turn could hire people to hopefully manufacture something. I would like to see the United States develop a manufacturing base, instead of just opening up a new restaurant like McDonald's, or a new Bennigan's type restaurant, or a new service type business. I'm not saying that we shouldn't open up new service businesses. I'm saying that I would like to have a renewed focus on helping businesses that are in light industrial type businesses, where they make a product, and that product can be it could be anything. Like I said, they could make light bulbs, they could make components for small cameras, they could make the whole camera and maybe then sub out the small parts. I mean, anything you could think of, the tripod that the camera is sitting on, the cell phones. There is no reason that we should have our cell phones made in Taiwan or in China. There's no reason that small businesses right in your own town can make iPhones. And so I would like to see that industrial base come back, and that would employ more people, and that would help provide good paying jobs. And even if they weren't good paying jobs, they would be jobs. And the way I see it, we're going to lower the cost of living. So if you don't get a job that makes $100,000 a year or $80,000 a year, and you get a job and you're only making $25,000 a year, or between you and your wife, that we're going to have this worked out where the monopolies are going to be broken up to the extent that the cost of living is going to go back to a reasonable level, so there won't be a need to have a job that's so hard to get because no one has enough money to pay you. So that would be my number two. And my number three would be, which really should be number one, but I care for those poor people who are the immediate suffering right now, would be to enforce our Constitution to the extent that it would be like the war on drugs, only it's going to be the war against the people who violate the Constitution. And it's going to be directed straight at the lawmakers and directed straight at the government officials who should know better. And we're going to get these people trained up. We're going to give them at least a 20-hour class, or no public official is going to be allowed to have a job working anywhere, even at the water company. If you're working for a municipality, if you're a police officer, you're going to have to receive a 20-hour class that's going to teach you about the Constitution, and maybe be followed up by a 5-hour class where it'll talk about the penalization phase, so that if you violate the Constitution against any one of the citizens of the United States, how many years in jail you will get. And then we're going to make sure that that those laws that are violating the Constitution now, which probably half the laws in the United States are one way or another entrapping people in situations where the law itself is against the Constitution, and so they're the main things that I wish for. And in general, I mean, if I could have a sort of an in general answer to, you know, what do these three items represent? They represent freedom and prosperity for all, and a safety net for those people who have fallen between the cracks or became ill, and that could be a mental illness or whatever. And so that there is no way that America and an American is under my three wishes, my Genie wishes, would fall between the cracks and be hungry, because there would be a food stamp program. There's going to be a roof over their head guaranteed no matter what. And I'm not talking about putting them in a jail as a roof. I'm talking about putting them in a condominium space where they've got their own condominium, and maybe there's a shared pool or something. But it doesn't have to be expensive. It could be a condominium that maybe would be $100,000, but by the time I'm done working things out, that condominium is going to be only $20,000 or $30,000, and it'll be subsidized somehow by the government. But then as this guy gets on his feet, he'll be able to pay for it, and then for a short period of time the government can pay for it. But we're going to immediately get these people into their own houses so that they can build up some pride, and there'll be mentors that will help these people, and regardless of their age, they're going to be helped. And I don't care who you are, but every single person on this earth, every God-born person on this earth is precious, and they have something in their mind, and they have something in their heart, and they have something in their soul that they can contribute to the rest of us, even if that's just simple labor, and maybe they're not the healthiest person in the world. Maybe they can do something for 10 hours a week to contribute to the cost of housing. Maybe they can only work 5 hours a week. Maybe all they can do is talk on the phone, but they can't do it for more than 10 hours a week. I mean, everyone can contribute something, and all the way up to, like I said, the business owners, which I want to, that whole increase in the middle class is going to come from increasing our industrial base. And also, like I said, I'm not against building up service businesses, but I think we need to have a focus right now on industrial base, because China right now is the big industrial power, and that's where they're really getting the leg up on us. and our dollars are flowing out of the United States. So no matter how much money the Fed lends into society in America today, it's without having industry here, the money is going to flow through the people's hands and eventually land in China, because that's where all the goods are made. And if that's where the goods are made, if the Fed were allowed to just print unlimited money and give it to the people would, to buy the goods they need, would have to run to China and spend it. So in the end, China would have the money. So I mean, we need to stop that. I'm not against trading and what I call fair trade, and I'm not for taxing. Like, for example, I don't want to tax China because they're eating our lunch with respect to light industry and even heavy industry. I don't want to tax those items. I want to be able to compete with them in such a way that between the shipping and going back, items going back and forth and all that, that we can actually build the products right here for the same prices they make them over there. And between that and the increased desire to, and a campaign that's a Buy American campaign, that we can stop this desire to buy all your goods from China and run over there. I don't think there needs to be some kind of a penalization or something. I mean, if there has to be, because there's some kind of a gross problem that there's no other way to handle it, then maybe a small tax or something like that on imported products, to if need be. But I'm saying, I believe that given a level playing field, and if our banks will cooperate, and they will, under my administration, they will be allowed to. I will authorize the Fed to do a QE4, and in fact, I will mandate it. If they don't want to do it, then we're just going to give the franchise of the Fed to somebody else who will do it, and we'll print American dollars, and those American dollars will only be able to go directly to the business owners. And the first business owners that will have access to this money are going to be those people who had businesses open prior to the crash and who went out of business post-crash, who were denied credit because the bank promised the money and the economy suddenly went into a recession, and there was little to no warning, and these faithful people spent the last penny they had in their pocket, and then a lot of them ended up losing their house as well, because they maybe even borrowed against their house to keep their business going, because Fox News was telling them the economy is turning around, and they believed it. Maybe that was true, and then maybe it took another downturn. But regardless, like I said, the genie came out of the bottle. That's what I would do. I would make sure that there's safety nets in place no matter what. I would make sure that that the middle class has the first dibs on any money that the bank's going to lend, and I would mandate the banks lend money to the industrialists and to the business owners that can prove they were in business, and they can simply prove it by showing an occupational license. And I'm sure they have photographic evidence of what they were doing, and with just a few pieces of evidence, that would be enough. And their credit, by the way, would be immaterial, would not equate into this. And I don't really think that should be a loan. I think in the beginning, to jumpstart this thing, that should be a grant. The banks were given money at an interest rate that was so low when there was the banker bailout that it just as well may have been a grant, because if you lend money to if the banks borrow money from the Fed and it's at 1% interest or a 0.5% interest, and there's no term limit when they have to pay it back, which essentially is what they had because they could roll it over indefinitely, then for the most part that's the next best thing to simply giving them the money. Now, I'm saying with the abuse that the American businessman took when the bubble burst, which was I blame entirely on the government not doing its job in managing the economy. And I'm not saying I want the economy managed by the government, but bad things were done, and the government wasn't listening to the people when they were saying things. I'll give you my case against Allstate, for example, how they were doing bad things against poor people, and they broke every rule in the book, and because of secrecy laws and because they became a bank, they were unsubpoenable. You know, you're not allowed to subpoena a bank, by the way. Their inner workings are trade secrets. So that's another reason why if you could do anything you wanted, you want to be a bank, because a bank, you can't subpoena a bank. I mean, you might be able to subpoena and question them as to how much money somebody has in the bank, but you can't subpoena their way of doing business or their internal methodologies and so forth and so on. So it gives them protections that other people don't have. But getting back to the original reason for the video here is I just wanted to explain to you, people that came to the United States, they came here because they wanted the Constitution. They found out that when they compared where they were living to what was available in the United States, that it was a better deal here, because at the time they had a choice. They could have, for a lower price, decided to not move and maybe fix their house up with whatever money they had, or they could have taken the last few bucks they had in their pocket, or whatever kind of money they were using, I guess lira if it was Italy, and then they would use that money to buy a ticket to come to the United States. So at some point they made a decision to say, screw this place, I want to move and I want to start fresh and I want to go to America. Well, when I was talking to my grandparents, because I asked them, once I became old enough to realize that we have a constitution, and started to take social studies and history in class, and started to realize how lucky we were, and saying the Pledge of Allegiance every day to the flag, and then we were taught why we were doing that. And so I started to question my grandparents, you know, why did you come here? And even though they couldn't speak English very well, it was sort of a broken English. My mother, who's fluent bilingual, was translating, and they could speak broken English enough that you could sort of get the gist of things. And the bottom line was they came here because they wanted to have freedom of speech, was a really, really big one, and they wanted freedom in privacy. They didn't want thugs coming into their house calling themselves police. They called them the Polizia or something in Italy, where they could just come into their house anytime they wanted. They could drag you out of your house because of your political ways, political views, and you could disappear. People would just disappear and they'd never find them again. I guess they could have been executed. It was everything in the Constitution that they came here for. That's why they came here. And they expected, when they got here, because they spent every penny they had to get here, they expected to have that, and they did. And for all these years, up until the last couple of decades, that was really the truth. They did, in fact, have that. Now, they've since passed away. I think if they were alive today, they would be very disappointed about how things turned out. But they were so worried about the freedom of speech that even after they got to America, one of the things that they used to drill into my head is they would always go like this, and I was like, well, I would say, Mom, you know, what is he talking? What's Grandpa talking about? What's Grandmom talking about? Well, they're saying, you know, don't talk about politics to anybody, and don't talk about religion to anybody, because they're the two things that get you in trouble. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, how could talking about religion or talking about politics get you in trouble? And then, of course, the story would come out that, you know, back in Italy, I mean, they were still thinking in the old ways. They were saying, you know, overseas, when you live in another country, you don't have freedom of speech, and for what you say, you could be held. It could be held against you. It's not to say someone can't hold it against you here, but I mean, they can't drag you away in a bag or something. They can just say, oh, well, he believes in Jesus, or he believes in the Quran, or he believes in being a Democrat, or he believes in the Republican philosophy. That's your rights are protected here, and you can think whatever you want. I mean, and then breaking the law is one thing, but thinking is not one of them. I mean, if I think something in my mind, like, well, I think that I think that all Democrats are no good and something needs to be done about them. Um, I can't be punished for that. And but in other countries, I mean, they could actually sort of categorize you. And but nowadays, you know, you hear about President Obama has lists. I mean, he has a what they call a kill list. A kill list. Now, what in the world? You know, this is kind of sounding to me like what my grandfather was warning me about, that your name could be put on a list and they could come and get you in the middle of the night and do away with you because of what you said or who you were talking about. And so they were very happy to be here, but they still said, don't talk about, the two things they said were, don't ever talk about politics and don't ever talk about religion. And even funny thing is, if you watch Jesse Ventura, he says, you know, when countries are at war and they're fighting over religion, you do not want to get between them when they're fighting over religion, because they take that to heart, and when they take that to heart, they fight really hard over it. And you know, it's kind of a silly argument, because I guess nobody knows the real truth about how the world was made. I mean, there's no absolute proof. We have a Bible and you have a Quran. I never saw a Quran, so I don't know. I never read the thing, but we have a Bible here, and I was raised a Christian. So to me, I would say, you know, if you had to live on a deserted island and there wasn't any law and you didn't really have the energy, time, or wherewithal, or lawyers, and it was just a few of you living on an island, I would say, well, if you just lived by the Ten Commandments, you know, you pretty much have a pretty decent life. You know, nobody kills anybody, nobody steals things from anybody, and but basically the Ten Commandments are really what you need. So I just also wanted to say that when you live in an ethnic family like an Italian family where I grew up, the other thing, and this was a real biggie, was respecting your elders. And respecting your elders, I mean, that was like the biggest, the most important thing. I mean, your grandparents may not have known anything about arithmetic. They might not have known anything about history other than what they lived through. They might not know anything that you learned in a formal education that you were getting, you know, in your school. But when it came down to obeying them, when they would say, okay, it's time to go to bed, or sweep the kitchen floor, or take the trash out, I mean, you better listen to them. Not only that, but they were good storytellers. And then when they started to tell you a story, I mean, they expected you to listen and learn from it. And they were your grandparents. And so I guess at that point, you know, you would call them like your mentors, so to speak, and you would really learn a lot from these people. And the funny thing is, you know, when at that age, when you're, you know, 7 or 8 years old or 10 years old, and they're telling you these stories, I mean, you're listening to what they're saying, because, you know, if you don't listen to what they're saying, there's hell to pay, because you're supposed to honor your elders and listen to them. So you sit there and you listen, but and the other side of your brain is saying, you know, this is bullshit. I'd rather be out playing soccer, or I'd rather be throwing my frisbee in the yard with my friends. But you know, when I think back today, I wish they were alive today, because they could come in front of the camera here, and with a translator they could tell you about why they came to America and how important the constitutional rights were. And even though they didn't know what the Constitution said, everything about it, they did know that the important things, that rights that they had, was the number one thing was the privacy and the freedom, the freedom of free speech. And having an honest press. I mean, these were the important things that even without reading the paperwork, that they were told that they wanted, and that they knew they could get in the so-called New World, which is America. And now today we see that the government, in order to enrich itself, wants to put its thumb down on the people and control them, because the people are asking for their constitutional rights. And when you see the government passing a law where the law is violating the constitutional right, there's your proof right there that what I'm saying is true. Because if they cared about the constitutional rights, they wouldn't pass a law that was in violation of the constitutional rights. And the other big thing about what my grandparents would say would be, mind your own business. Don't spile your neighbors, or try to overhear what they're saying, or just shut up and go about your own business and work hard. And they were like, go to school and learn, make sure you graduate, and if you go to school and you graduate, and that means you're smart and you're going to get a good job, and then you'll become successful. And they were willing to give you the last penny out of their pocket, provided it would go to education, because they believed in getting an education and learning. And they believed in lifelong learning. They didn't care how old you were. If you were 50 years old and you were in class learning something, as far as they were concerned, it was almost like they would really worship your desire to learn. They wanted you to learn, and they wanted you to be successful, and they wanted so much for you to be successful that they were willing to sacrifice everything in order to make sure that their grandchildren, their children, and their grandchildren were successful. And that's how important it was to them. But honoring your elders is really a really big deal. And the kids today, they think that they know it all. I mean, they need disciplining. I think in one aspect, I think the police are kind of like feeling like they're being put in the position of being the parents of these kids who maybe never really grew up in a family where the parents and the grandparents said, hey, look, you better listen to and honor and respect your elders. And it wasn't just them as the elders, it was any elder. In other words, if the next door neighbor and the next door neighbor, he's a 50-year-old man, and he said, hey, listen, I want you to stop throwing your trash in the front lawn, because when the wind blows it comes over. You better listen to him, because he's your elder, and if he tells you to do something, then you better jump. And so it wasn't just listening to them, it was listening. All elders are very important. So even if you look at like the Asian culture, and they teach there that the elders are important. And in the Japanese community also the same thing. The elders are important, and the children are taught to listen to the elders, because the elders know. And just because the children are in school and maybe they know more technical things, or they might know more science than the elders, it didn't matter. The elders were considered very, very important, and they were the mentors for the children with respect to behavior, and everyday behavior, and how you should carry yourself through life. And there was a major emphasis on education. Now, also when you think about it, maybe it was that overemphasis of education that led the United States to go down this road with, well, everybody should have access to a college education, so we're going to give loans to everybody. But you see that whole thing got bastardized to the point where you have the greedy people taking over. And if a student comes to the college and says, my grandparents told me to get an education and to be smart, and after thousands of kids start coming through the college starts putting two and two together, and they're thinking, boy, the government's willing to lend this guy $100,000. Let's take him for all we can get. And I can even tell you a story about, I almost purchased a private school when I was in the real estate business. It was a listing I had, and it was a small school, and it made a lot of money because they were getting these loans from the government, and the students would turn that loan money over to the school for tuition, and then the school would teach. It was like a secretarial school where they would teach people who didn't really know anything how to type and basic secretarial work and all. And they were charging like $10,000 to teach total dumbbell how to be a secretary. So maybe it was a noble cause, but the tuition, over a period of several years, as the government started to increase how much money it was willing to pay, this particular school, I'm not going to tell you what school it was, but they got greedy, and they started to take more money and charging the kids more money, and so that just put the kids further into debt. And then when they got out, so they knew how to type, or they knew the basics of how to run a computer where they may not have known before. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that at some point you have the schools taking advantage of the fact that the government is willing to lend them money. As soon as that money is on the table, the price of the object being sold or the service being sold starts to go up. Now, if the student shows up and says, well, I'm willing to go to your school, but I only have $500 instead of $5,000, maybe the tuition wouldn't have gone up so high. So, I fault the system for being generous to the point where whatever the college asks, they are willing to lend to the student, so the student could pay this huge tuition. Then he gets stuck with this bill, and there's no guarantee of a job. But my grandparents are dead, long since passed away, and my father passed away. Now I only have my mother and my brothers and my sister, and it's that aspect of my life is gone. I have no way now of going back and asking them any more questions, but I just wanted to fill you in. It wasn't just my grandparents, but their brothers and their sisters, who I met, the other elders that came over from Italy. They all pretty much had the same tagline. They came here because they wanted the Constitution, and now the Constitution is being taken away. So the question becomes, well, what do you do about it? And then you have to ask yourself, well, why would somebody want to take away the Constitution when that was why everybody wanted to come to the United States? Because they wanted to have these inalienable rights that you would think that even if you were in any country in the world you would have, the right to free speech. How in the world is free speech ever hurting anybody? Because if someone's saying something you don't like, you could just go like this, or you could turn the radio off, or not watch that internet channel. But when you think about it, right now the government wants to. If the government could have anything it wanted, it would want to control the internet, because it's afraid of people speaking their mind and getting together, because they want their Constitution back. That's really the main item, I think, that's frightening the government. A lot of these laws that were enacted, the government now knows that the people are hip to the fact that they're being arrested for laws that are in violation of the Constitution. They really didn't do anything wrong. It's a bad law to start with. And so, and the only thing that's really working right today in the United States, not the only thing, but one of the things that is working correctly not only in the United States but in the whole world, is the internet. The internet is working great. People are communicating through the internet. They're watching television through the internet. They're allowed to blow off steam by like talking to a camera, like I'm doing right now, and letting out their opinion. And you can either listen to me or not listen to me. I'm giving you some valuable information. I'm giving you some insight into why people came here from, in my case, why they came from Italy. And it's the same reason why they came from other countries. They came here because they know once they're here, they're safe from the government doing bad things to them, because the Constitution guarantees them rights that the government can't just come and put a bag on their head and take them away, or take them away and not have a trial, charge them with some kind of crime, or maybe not tell them what they're charged with and just carry them away because they don't like them. So you have a lot of rights here Wouldn't even say it's a lot of rights. I would just say they're just, the Constitution has just a few very important inalienable rights that the government now is sort of finding, oh, it's kind of troublesome because we can't push our will on these people and give ourselves even ever greater raises, and we can't force these people to think the way we want them to think, so that we can keep ourselves in power. Because if you have a populace that's able to communicate and able to think freely and able to communicate with each other to the extent that we have on the internet, it frightens the government, because now all of a sudden the government's like, well, the worst thing that could happen is you could have an armed population, because an armed population, if they don't like what the government could do, they could show up at the White House one day. All the farmers might show up with pitchforks and shotguns and say, all right, we're evicting you all from the White House, all of you, and we're gonna vote some new people in, and we're going to change the way we're doing things. I mean, that's really what they're afraid of. But even if you took all their guns away, the other thing they're afraid of is the people talking. And without the guns, they're afraid that people might show up in mass down there at the White House and throwing them all out. And because they're going to want their free speech, no matter what you say or what you do, they're going to want their Constitution back, because that's why they came here. And when they went through school, it was drilled into their head that they had these inalienable rights. We all learned this in school. And now you see that they want to have the core curriculum changed, and they want to tell the students that, I mean, if you read some of this bullcrap that they want to put in front of the students, they're trying to tell the students that the founding fathers were treasonous, and that they were the first terrorists because they broke away from England. Well, I mean, look, they came here, and they're thousands of miles away from England. The United States really is a different country. It's not a part of England, and they had to fight to make sure and guarantee that they were separate from England, who wanted to claim the property as their own. But the people wanted to be free, and so once they were able to successfully break away from England, and they wanted everybody to have these certain rights, so they could have a completely free country that would be able to grow. And as it worked out great, because the smartest people and the brightest people in the world, once the word got out around the world that the United States was a place they could come where they could think freely, they could open up their own business, whatever money that they earned would be their money, and their money could be reinvested into their own business, and then they could become rich by working hard. Nobody was giving it to them, but they knew that if they worked hard and they focused and they got a little bit lucky, that they didn't have to worry about being thrown in jail for saying the wrong thing. Whereas back in their home country, if they started to make a lot of money, they might get thrown in jail because not even because it was something that they said, but then they might say it was something that they said, just so that their wealth could be taken away and confiscated. So the United States, in the Constitution, you have protections against illegal forfeiture and seizure, and freedom of speech, and right to own a gun, and so that put the people in charge of the government versus the government in charge of the people. Right now what we're seeing is the government is afraid that the people want their Constitution back. Therefore, and as soon as they get their Constitution back all the way, it's going to enable them to put a government in power that's going to have to more or less listen to the people to a greater extent than they're listening right now. So in order to get around that, that's why you're seeing the government doing everything in secret, because the people are going to say, well, what do you mean you're doing this or you're doing that? We don't agree with that. So the government figuring, well, we can't do something because it's against the Constitution, or we're not allowed to go to war without telling the people. So what do? They do it secretly, or they'll hire mercenaries, and so the government will wash its hands and say, well, we don't have anything to do with it. Meanwhile, they're funding this operation that's just as big as World War II, but it's all being carried out by mercenaries in Blackwater or Academy or some other organizations, and they're handing out weapons to other countries and talking them into doing the dirty work, and basically trying to, with this expansionist mentality, because what they're really trying to do is get a hold of the natural resources of other countries and then transfer those resources into private oligarchs who are really Americans, and or controlled by Americans to an extent that maybe a percentage of it is owned by an American who maybe helps them overthrow an existing legitimate government of another country. And so these wars break out all over the world over things, when really maybe my grandfather's idea and my grandmother's idea of just mind your own business and work hard and get an education and work hard really is the best way to go, and honor your elders. And so that's why the Constitution is so important, because these right, you can't own a business today, and when you can't write a business plan, if you wanted to, for example, make a plan where you could take that plan to the bank and then ask the bank to fund you, and the first thing the bank is going to say, well, what are you going to do? Do you have a business plan? That's what they ask for. And you write a business plan, and if you think about it right now, writing a business plan that goes out for 5 years or 10 years is really kind of a joke, because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and the bank doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow, because with the Constitution being violated and trampled on, whatever it is that you're building, or whatever it is that you're selling, or whatever it is you're doing, could be turned into some kind of illegal act tomorrow, and thus your business wouldn't be worth anything, and the bank wouldn't want to lend you any money on that, because you'd go out of business because you weren't allowed to sell your product, because the product you're making would become illegal, or they would make it so hard to sell your product that even if they didn't make it illegal, it would be replaced maybe by something else. So that's another problem that we have right now, is that a businessman can't write a business plan that goes beyond a couple of days, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I mean, so many things happen that aren't supposed to happen, because the Constitution is supposed to guarantee that these things don't happen, but they happen anyway because the government is trampling all over our constitutional rights. Now, let's talk about one of the rights, the right to privacy. It's being stamped on all, when you talk on the telephone. I mean, you're being tape recorded, digitally recorded. So if you come up with an idea, and somebody at the government might think, okay, they hear your idea, and you're discussing it with your mentor on the telephone or with your other business partners, even though no one is supposed to hear this other than the government, assuming that even they were doing this in some kind of fashion that was only supposed to protect against terrorism. They might see, oh, well, somebody's got a good idea, and then so your idea could be stolen, or a dossier could be built up on you. I mean, just by filing your income taxes, and I'm not saying not to file your income taxes, I'm saying we need to change the system. But when you file your income taxes, they ask you so many questions that they could build up a dossier on you as if you're some kind of target of a criminal investigation or something, because they're going to know who you're dealing with, they're going to have all your receipts, they're going to know what occupation you're in, they're going to know how much money you make, they're going to know where your business, they're going to know so much on you, they're going to know more about you than you even remember yourself. And so I think that the taxes need to be collected to run the government, obviously, so you should want to pay taxes, especially if you're earning a lot of money. There shouldn't be any reason why you wouldn't want to pay taxes, so that we can do the other things that I just said, that if the genie came out of the bottle, that would be to help the poor people, so there would be a safety net. And So the point I'm trying to make is the other reason that my grandparents came here was because they knew that there was going to be some privacy, and that someone wasn't going to come down from the government and say, well, I'm here to search your house, or I'm here to stop you on the sidewalk and shake you down, and the only thing, and you've got a shopping bag, and steal half your groceries because the police officers are corrupt, and there's nobody there that can stop them from the corruption. And now you see that even now, where you know, you hear years ago that the Mexican police were corrupt and they were shaking people down, and the word on the street was, well, if you go to Mexico on vacation, you got to watch out, because if you carry money, you know, the police might shake you down and steal all your money, and they just say, well, if you don't let me steal your money, I'm going to arrest you for something that you didn't do. We have to make sure that level of honesty is maintained by our government, and the only protection we really have is the Constitution, and it holds the government to be accountable. And I want to hold my congressman accountable to read every single law that he signs, whether the president signs it or not. I want to make sure that he's voting the way I want him to vote. Otherwise, I want to vote him out of power in the next election and let somebody else in who thinks more along my lines. And I definitely don't want the internet controlled, because there's nothing wrong with the internet. It's working fine right now. The only thing I can think of why the government wants to put the internet under FCC is that they want to either tax it, in which case they're running up the bill on the internet even higher, and the internet costs more now than it should because of monopoly. Like I told you, I went downtown to say, look, you know, the internet costs so much money. If I could find some investors and wire up the whole town, I think I could deliver internet service for half price and still make a profit. And they're like, no, you can't do that, because, you know, we only allow this company to deliver internet service to the city. Well, I don't know who gets a kickback on that, but I mean, it sounds to me like it's a monopoly. It might be not a national monopoly, but it's a local monopoly. But that's another big problem we have in the country, these too big to fail banks. Well, if you have a bank that's too big to fail, then that's proof that you've got an antitrust violation. You've got a monopoly. That bank is so big that it can't fail, then all of a sudden the government has to bow down to its wishes, because it's a systemic problem that's so big that it's a monopoly. Any business that's too big to fail is a monopoly and needs to be broken up. But I think, though, the immediate need would be to get a quantitative easing going, a reinvigoration of the Constitution with penalties. And like I said, if I manage to get into power, I'm going to have mandatory jail terms for anyone working for the government who violates someone's constitutional rights, or even a businessman's constitutional rights for his business, or a corporation's constitutional rights. So if they're tapping your phone and you catch them, they're going down for 10 years. And the government will not be allowed to do things in secret. That's a big, gigantic red flag. The government doing things in secret with tax dollars is a huge risk. It's like taking the flag down off the flagpole and on your battleship, and then raising up a red flag, and indicating something's wrong, or taking the American flag and turning it upside down, indicating something's wrong, and then hoisting it back up so everybody knows there's something wrong and we need help. These oligarchs are going to, if monopolies are allowed to get bigger and bigger and bigger, you can just imagine what's happening, and that's why your politicians are fighting so hard to keep their jobs and to shut the internet down and to keep everything secret, because they've got relationships going between the businesses and the government, which is turning fascist, and they don't mind these antitrust violations because the corporations are they're doing favors for each other. In other words, corporations are help keeping these politicians are in power, and the politicians are making sure that these corporations have a lot of business to do, and they're being paid for by contracts with the government. That's another reason why they like war so much, because if you have a war, and you're going to need a lot of ammunition, you're going to need bullets, you're going to need machinery, you're going to be building vehicles, and so the companies that build these things, I mean, it's no secret, folks, that there's money in war, and the companies that build the Stryker vehicle, the companies that build the Humvee, the companies that make the machine guns, and the companies that make the M16 rifle, and the companies that make the other guns that they have, and the ammunition, and the bombs, and the aircraft. I mean, there's an awful lot of money in war, and if you can't have a war that you're allowed to tell the people about, well, the next best thing would be to have a secret war. Now, then that brings up the other question is, well, if you have a secret war and you still need these items to fight the war, like the Humvees, and you still need the bullets, and you still need the guns, you know, how do you get that money? And you have to have some kind of I guess a secret budget or something, because you can't really hide how much money it costs to have a war. So the budget has got to have transparency. You have to have a balanced budget. Now, I'm not against the Fed, like Ron Paul was saying, well, we need to audit the Fed, and we need to do away with the Fed, and the Congress can print its own money, and you know, maybe that's true, but I think for now that's not our main problem. Well, our quality of life as Americans has been better because we have the Fed, and whether or not it sort of cheats the other countries around the world is sort of immaterial at this point, because we have had over the last 50 years a higher quality of life because we have been able to run a deficit. And I suppose if we're able to do that, and the other countries are putting up with it and taking the dollar, and by the way, when they do take an American dollar, they can spend that American dollar overseas, so I don't see where it really has harmed them any at all. As long as the dollar is accepted currency overseas by printing dollars and having a quantitative easing, that's not really the big bad issue. Where the bad problem comes in is whoever is allowed to issue the money, if that money does not go to the business people first, where they can use it to manufacture things to keep the economy to the point where if the other rest of the world doesn't like you anymore, we can make our own cell phones, we can make solar panels, we can make electricity plants, we can make trains, we can make automobiles, we can make everything we need here and grow our own food. If the world gets angry at us, we're a large enough country that and with the natural resources we have, we can just pretty much say, okay, if you don't like us, that's fine, we're just going to stay home and we'll buy American and we don't need you. But if you don't, if you give the money to oligarchs who basically are running away with the money to China and putting the money into Chinese businesses, then those items aren't being made here. And if China does something bad or gets angry, or there's some kind of embargo, like we have an embargo against Russia right now with sanctions going back and forth, which, by the way, these are acts of war. You know, when you embargo or put sanctions on a country, that's like an act of war. So, but you can't stop a big country like Russia by putting up an embargo, because they're big enough and they have enough resources, enough manpower, that they're just going to work around it and make everything themselves. And same thing with the United States. You can't shut the United States off by shutting off the imports. It would hurt us more than anybody else, because we're allowing the other countries to make all of our cell phones and all our computers and stuff. But the point is, once we bring that light industry and that heavy industry back home, which we need to do with a quantitative easing number 4, it will lift the middle class, it will put those people back to work, and it will make us less reliant on foreign countries. So if they get angry at us, then oh well, it's kind of like not any big loss. Definitely more of a loss to them than it's going to be to us, and that's pretty much what the way I see it. So, okay, I say we have a QE for, give it to the business owners, and we need to track down those business owners who got burned during the who got burned during 2007, 2008 when the bubble burst, and that money was given to the banks. That money never came out of the banks to Main Street. I can tell you, it just didn't. So these stores are still closed here. The light industry is all still closed. So we need to, I think we should give them grants like $500,000 to $1 million to start off with. And that's assuming that you can even talk them into coming back into business. And they're not going to want to do it unless they know that the Constitution is going to be restored and that there has to be a penalty for those who violate the Constitution. And that's what my campaign is about. That's what I'm going to do. We're going to fix the laws that are bad. We're going to penalize people who don't follow the Constitution. And we're going to quantitative ease, and we're going to give the money straight to the small business owners. So that we can stimulate the economy and just bypass all oligarchs, bypass the government. Money will go straight to the business owners. Okay, thanks a lot.